The New York Jets finally took out the trash, people. The New York Jets have officially benched Zach Wilson. The Zach Wilson era, not era, people, era, ERROR, looks like it's coming to an end. They're starting him. Well, they're starting Tim Boyle over him. And their Friday game against the Miami Dolphins. Listen, people, I don't get why Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas remain so committed to a guy that hasn't shown you any reason to keep throwing him out there. Zach Wilson, in all the years that he's been starting at QB for the Jets, has shown zero promise. The best game he ever had was against the Kansas City Chiefs, and even with them having his best game ever, they still lost that game because he turned it over in the closing moments. I'm so happy that the New York Jets are opting to start somebody else. Even though Tim Boyle probably won't be that better, you gotta send a message to the locker room that you no longer are going to play politics. Because that's basically what it was. Any single week the Jets chose to start Zach Wilson after Aaron Rodgers got injured was politicking. After the third or fourth week when Zach Wilson showed you that he didn't have what it takes to keep your season afloat, you should have benched him. Despite how bad Tim Boyle may be, the locker room needed to see somebody else there at quarterback because it shows you that you're being accountable and you're not playing favorites. The more games Zach Wilson starts at quarterback for the Jets, the more divided this locker room was going to become. They had a players-only meeting last week after they lost on Sunday night to the Las Vegas Raiders, and I said that players-only meeting was pretty pointless because what was it going to solve? The biggest problem with the Jets offense this year, outside of the offensive line and lack of talent that they have at receiver, is Nathaniel Hackett and Zach Wilson. When Aaron Rodgers got injured 3 plays into that Buffalo game, those coaches, after winning that game, they couldn't sleep that night. You want to know why? Because there was a lot of hope and optimism about the Jets coming into this season because of them getting Aaron Rodgers. And with Aaron Rodgers not being there, there was no way this team was going to be able to have success without him. And it's not like this team was going to be all that great even with Aaron Rodgers. It's just that you expected for Aaron Rodgers to be good enough to kind of be able to overcome the limitations that the Jets had. And plus, this was a team that was built for Aaron Rodgers. That's why they went out there and they hired Nathaniel Hackett. And they got all these guys that Aaron Rodgers recommended them going out to sign. And now that he's not there, this team has been a complete mess. Now, benching Zach Wilson, I don't think the offense is going to be that much better, but at least you got a new face out there, and now the defense doesn't have to be frustrated with continuing to see Zach Wilson out there and stinking it up. You see, it's a difference when a team's struggling and they attempt to make changes versus throwing out the same guy every single week and getting the same results. That's an easy way to lose your locker room if you're Robert Saleh. And if you would have chose to start Zach Wilson this week against the Miami Dolphins, this locker room probably would have even turned on you a lot more than what they already have. Zach Wilson, this dude is not NFL starting quarterback material. At best, he can be a decent backup. And when you think about what's next for Zach Wilson after this, obviously he's not going to start again for the Jets unless Tim Boyle gets injured. Regardless of how bad Tim Boyle plays, Zach Wilson should not touch the football ever again for the New York Jets. And I was really shocked that they didn't try to trade for a quarterback at the trade deadline. Imagine if they would have had Joshua Dobbs, or if you would have got Gardner Minshew, or even Marcus Mariota. Any of those 3 options or anybody else would be better than what you have at the helm than Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is not it. He has a great arm. He does have the ability to be a really good athlete at times and extend plays and pick up yards with his legs, but he can't read defenses. He's inaccurate. Garrett Wilson, the NFL posted a highlight of him running a phenomenal route, getting wide open, and yet they cut the route off as soon as he got open. You want to know why? Because Zach Wilson didn't throw him the damn football. And even when Garrett Wilson gets open and Zach Wilson throws him the football, he can't throw him an accurate pass to save his life. He just doesn't have what it takes to be a starting quarterback in this league. And coming out of BYU in that draft, I was really high on Zach Wilson. I thought that he had what it took to be the next Mahomes because of his ability to get outside the pocket and make all these great throws downfield. But it turns out I was wrong because a lot of that he did at BYU doesn't translate to success in the NFL. And Zach Wilson, his career playing out the way that it has, him essentially being a bust at this point, pretty much, has forced me to reevaluate the way that I go about scouting quarterbacks. Now, for me to have a first-round grade on you, I got to see more than just a great arm and athleticism. I got to see your ability to process defenses. I got to see your ability to deliver accurate passes downfield and be able to win from within the pocket. You know, Anthony Richardson, he was a phenomenal because this dude is 6'4", 6'5", 255, running 4.43. And he has a rifle for an arm, and also he has really good intangibles. Zach Wilson, he doesn't have good intangibles. He doesn't have the study habits that you need to become a starting caliber NFL QB. And the New York Jets thought that trading for Aaron Rodgers, not only would it give them a better chance of making it to the playoffs, but it also would help Zach Wilson develop. Maybe Aaron Rodgers will rub off on Zach Wilson, and you could possibly get 5% of Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson this year with Aaron Rodgers' presence. But that didn't work out the way that they envisioned. Zach Wilson is garbage. And I'm glad that the New York Jets finally cut the bullshit and they finally stopped politicking and they finally put this dude on the bench where he belongs. Zach Wilson belongs on the bench as a backup quarterback. And even then, if you were to ask me where does Zach Wilson rank amongst backup quarterbacks in the league, he doesn't even rank in the top 5, top 10, or the top 15. There are 15 other backup quarterbacks that I'd rather have than Zach Wilson. Imagine if the Jets would have had Jacoby Brissett this year. Oh my God, if you had Jacoby Brissett, you would have been straight. Hell, Kenny Pickett. Well, I'm not going to go that far because Kenny Pickett, we're going to get into him a little bit later too. He's not even that better than Zach Wilson, but at least he gives the Jets a better chance. I'd rather have Kenny Pickett than Zach Wilson any day of the week. Hell, give me Desmond Ridder over Zach Wilson. Bryce Young over Zach Wilson. Like, this dude is so garbage. I don't understand how he's been able to be the starting quarterback of the New York Jets for this long before it took them saying, you know what, this is it. We're getting beat to hell by the Buffalo Bills. We need to make a change. What took them so long? It took them getting blown out by Buffalo for Robert Saleh to stop being delusional and realize that this dude, Zach Wilson, is not it. I don't know if Robert Saleh thought that eventually, 1 week out of nowhere, Zach Wilson was miraculously going to figure it out and he was just going to become the quarterback that you envisioned him becoming when you drafted him a couple of years ago. But you know what they say? Better late than never. But in this situation, you bench Zach Wilson too late. Because at this point, your season is over. There's no way the Jets are going to be able to remain in playoff contention when they got to play the Dolphins this week. And Aaron Rodgers isn't expected to return until week 16. You should have went out there and traded for a quarterback at the trade deadline. But instead, you say, oh, well, Zach Wilson knows the playbook. There's not really anybody else out there who could come in and learn enough of the playbook in time in terms of giving us a chance to win. That's bullshit, man. What Robert Saleh was doing was politicking, and that's why there was growing frustrations in the locker room, even if Tim Boyle isn't good. The players rather have him out there that continue to throw out the same nonsense at quarterback that they've been doing the last 2 years. This dude costed the Jets a spot in the postseason last year. And he did the same thing this season. And the players, they see favoritism. They don't like favoritism. Players like being held accountable and everybody else being held accountable in the same fashion, regardless of how good the quarterback is. That's why you didn't have so many locker room controversies with the Patriots, because Bill Belichick treated Tom Brady the same way he treated everybody else in the locker room. When Tom Brady was getting cussed out, everybody else was getting the same cussings too. And with this whole Zach Wilson, New York Jets saga, they did a really poor job at managing this, because this locker room grew so frustrated that they're having players only meeting when the only thing to discuss is how can you overcome having an awful quarterback and Zach Wilson throwing you passes. Like, if I was a player in this locker room and I was Sauce Gardner and company, I would have took a stand to this. I would have went right to Robert Saleh and I would have said, now you know you're dead wrong for continuing to throw out that abysmal quarterback every single week. You really think that Zach Wilson, this garbage, gives us the best chance to win? What the hell is wrong with you? I would have looked at Robert Saleh dead in his eyes and I would have asked him that question, man to man, what's wrong with you? Because as a player, like, there's no way you can tolerate this. You're doing everything you can to help your team win games, and yet your coach keeps throwing out a quarterback that puts you at a disadvantage. Like, this is embarrassing that it took the Jets this long to make this decision. And if it wasn't for them getting Aaron Rodgers, Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, they should get the door. Joe Douglas has done a really good job at drafting, but when it comes to their free agency acquisitions, they haven't been great. And Robert Saleh, he's a good defensive-minded coach, and he's a guy that a lot of players in the locker room love. But when you politic the way that the Jets did with this Zach Wilson situation, being reluctant and waiting too long to bench him, the players, they lose respect for you because you're not holding Zach Wilson accountable as you are the rest of the team. You see, if anybody else plays bad at their position, as bad as what Zach Wilson has, they get benched in about 4 or 5 games. So the fact that they were throwing Zach Wilson out there just because where they drafted him shows that they were playing politics. And the best way to lose a locker room is when you play politics. And also playing politics is also what costs you to miss out on the playoffs. The best coaches in the league, they're not afraid to bench somebody that they drafted in the first round. And I'm eager to see if Mike Tomlin is going to do the same thing with Kenny Pickett eventually. But I'm happy, despite not being a New York Jets fan, that they finally have chose to take out the trash. You know, what they need to do with Zach Wilson is what I used to do every Sunday night when I was staying at my mom before I graduated high school and came down to college. They need to put Zach Wilson in the garbage, set that thing on the side of the road, and wait for the garbage people to come pick him up in the morning.